It's finally that time of year. We, the committee of the College Football Playoff, will be making our first official rankings of the college football season. With the new playoff format making its debut, 12 teams will look to punch their ticket with just a few weeks left in the season. I'm your host, Massimo Buonagurio, on this segment of Penn State Sports Night, along with Lauren Harth and Jezenia Marrero. But guys, with the expanded format of the College Football Playoff, we're going to see a lot more teams this year, and a lot of the teams that perform outstanding every year with Texas, Georgia, and Ohio State. But we're also going to get to see some teams that have definitely surprised a lot of people. So I want to ask you guys, which teams have shocked you guys the most and you think deserve a spot in the playoff?
The first team that comes to mind for me is Boise State. They have had a stellar breakout season that I think nobody was expecting. They've proven themselves to be a powerhouse and somebody with playoff potential, and also could possibly get a bid to the playoffs, but also are in a great standing to get the group of 5 bid to the playoffs. Key to that is, I believe, their offense. Ashton Gentry making a strong case for the offense. He's helping them not only get further into the averaging 45 points a game, but he's also just helped them get to that 7-1 record. Despite their loss to Oregon week 2 of the season, it was only 3 points, so they have a lot left to show this season, and I think they've set themselves up well to get that group of 5 bid. Army is the only team in my mind who's giving them a potential run for their money with their still undefeated season, but they're yet to face off against a ranked opponent. They have Notre Dame in a few weeks, and that'll be the real test, I think, to see if Army or Boise State's going to get that group of 5 bid.
You make a great point there, Lauren, but I'm going to go with the University of Miami. So I'm from South Florida, so I've always been a Miami fan, and every year we say they're making it to the playoffs. But this year, I feel very confident and not as delusional. They're currently 9-0, and Cam Ward has just completely transformed this season, and their roster has come together. And I think it just shows the true brotherhood that this team was able to form this year. Last year, they had Tyler Van Dyke. He entered the transfer portal, now is with Wisconsin, and they're 5-4. So I think that shows what the problem was the quarterback. So I'm really happy that Cam Ward was able to come from Washington State and have such an electric season so far. And, you know, they're playing high-scoring games. They're coming out not as strong as they should in the beginning, but what's really important is that they're making those wins. And towards the end, they are figuring out what to do, because in so many of their games, it's been second-half games, and they've defeated so many teams. You know, people may say their schedule strength isn't as good, but they say that about the ACC all the time. So I don't think that that's a valid point to say that University of Miami isn't doing that good this season.
I think you're definitely right with that. The only thing I would say is, you touched on it, their strength of schedule, but they're set up well right now to win the ACC, which will get them the auto bid. If they didn't have that, then it kind of goes into a little bit of a gray area, but they are set up well to get that automatic ACC bid.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick note on 2 other teams, just like Miami, undefeated BYU and Indiana. I mean, just like you talked about strength of schedule. I mean, BYU, if they do win the Big 12, they'll obviously have that automatic bid, and Indiana as well, but they haven't really played them well, but they have definitely surprised me. But let's go to the teams that shouldn't make it in. Obviously, we've had to make some, as the committee, we've had to make some definitely controversial decisions over the last few years, especially last year when we left out undefeated Florida State, which a lot of people didn't like, and I even wanted Florida State to sue us, which didn't end up, didn't age well. They lost 63-3 to Georgia, and now they're 1-8 this year. But what powerhouse teams do you think shouldn't make the playoff this year?
I'm going to go with the University of Alabama. You know, I just feel like this team has had a very hard time adjusting without Saban. They're not doing awful. You know, they only lost 2 games, but one of those games was Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a non-ranked team, still not ranked. They should have never had that type of game against a team like Vanderbilt. But they also lost to Tennessee, which is a little bit more expected because it's Tennessee. They're ranked. You know, but the University of Alabama has had a lot of struggles so far this season. And, you know, they're going to play LSU this Saturday. They're coming off a bye week, and that is going to be a very tough environment for them to play in. Similarly to Tennessee, I'm going to go with that same type of strange environment. It's going to have a lot of fans. So I want to see how Alabama is going to be able to match up against LSU. They're not ranked, but I still feel like they're going to have a really hard time doing that. Additionally, yes, they have good players. They have a good roster. They always do. They're known for that. But I think they're having a really hard time with that coach transition. What do you think, Lauren?
I agree with you that Alabama's kind of, in my mind, one of those bubble teams, kind of how do they finish the season? And I had actually a really hard time coming up with an answer to this, because teams that normally we'd be like, oh my gosh, they're so out of it, are actually still in it with the expanded playoffs. So I think Alabama still has a case, But the team that came to mind for me was honestly Indiana. They have yet to play a ranked opponent, and they will only play Ohio State as their ranked opponent on their schedule, which I think makes it difficult to say that they're at the level that other teams are, and they don't have the same schedule that a team like Alabama does. Yes, the loss to Vanderbilt really hurts them, but they were on the road at Tennessee. So I go back to Indiana. They are 9-0 for the first time in program history, made it back into the AP top 10 for the first time since November in 2020, but they're just yet to get anywhere against a ranked opponent, and they need to do that first. And then I'm willing to discuss their playoff abilities, but not until after that Ohio State matchup.
And to quickly go back to Alabama, against South Carolina, they've had an issue this entire season of just penalties. They had 7 penalties against South Carolina. And last year, I said on Penn State Sports Night that Alabama does an amazing job at just sneaking their way up through the playoffs. So I will not be surprised if they do that again this year.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously there's still a couple of weeks left in the season. There's 1-loss teams and 2-loss teams. So who knows? I mean, some big teams could lose and then they drop down and then Alabama drops back in. Another team, Ole Miss, they were strong early, like they were 6th in the preseason and then they just kind of fell off. So, but let's go to the best of the best. Obviously, the top 4 teams in the playoff are the teams that win the respective conference championships, but only one team could be number 1. So who do you guys think has earned that spot and should be the number 1 seed?
There's no doubt in my mind that the University of Georgia should be the number 1 seed. Yes, they do have a loss to Alabama, who maybe has lost some strength for the Georgia to make their case that it wasn't that bad of a loss, but it was their first trip to Alabama, regular season, game played at a college stadium. They've only met in the SEC championship or the college football playoffs at a neutral site. So that really makes it difficult for Georgia to have that home crowd atmosphere. But they, since that loss, have won their last 4 games by 2 possessions or more, one of them notably being against Texas when they traveled to face off against, at the time, number 1 Texas in Austin. They have been able to really figure it out after that loss, know where they need to go going forward. And I really do think they beat out the other conferences for the strength of schedule. And maybe I'm putting too much emphasis onto the strength of schedule, but I do think that really shows who the best of the best is, that they were able to figure out what wasn't working for their team and what to do going forward. So that's why I put Georgia up at the top despite their loss to Alabama.
You make a great point there, especially with strength of schedule. I mean, that's why Florida State was just
that's why we put
kicked
we kicked them out. That's why we didn't even have them
last year. But speaking a little bit about Georgia, I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit, Lauren, because I turned on the game on Saturday, Florida-Georgia, and that was just insane. Carson Beck threw 3 interceptions, and when I turned it on, they were in the 3rd quarter, and the score was 14-14, and I was like, what is going on in college football today? But anyways, my number 1 pick is Oregon. Oregon has just had such a dominant couple of years, and it starts with Dan Lanning himself. He came in 2021. He actually, very funny as we talk about University of Miami and Georgia, he came from University of Georgia as a defensive coordinator, and Mario Cristobal left Oregon, leaving that spot open for him. And both teams are 9-0 now, University of Miami and Oregon, which is really cool to just see how sports and college football works out. But this team is just complete. The depth in their players is immaculate. So I really feel like they deserve that number 1 spot. And they beat Ohio State. They've done a really good job coming into the Big Ten. That's just huge because they were in the Pac-12 previously. So I feel like they've had an amazing season so far with that. And even against Michigan last weekend, I mean, Michigan isn't how Michigan usually has been the last couple of years. But they played man-on-man coverage against Oregon, and Oregon came out and did an amazing job being able to take that victory.
Well, no matter who we pick, no one's going to really like our rankings anyway, because they never like them. But in just a little less than 24 hours, our first college football playoffs will be finalized. 12 teams, and only 12 teams will make it, and everyone else will not. I'm Massimo Buonagurio alongside Lauren Harth and Jezenia Marrero. Thank you for watching this segment of Penn State Sports Night.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.